Hello. So I just want to do a few quick introductions. I'll introduce myself, bringing us all here together today, then introduce the panel. But I just wanted to say hello, happy afternoon. It's Saturday, it's hot outside. So this is always the better place to be at this point. So I was talking to Leonard, I said, I wonder if the heat will cause folks to come inside, and it looks like we have a pretty good crowd, right? It's like that whole movie theater effect, like on hot days when everybody flocks to the movie theater, even if the movie's not good. And so, but this will be better. So let me first just introduce myself to the group. So my name is Umar. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm the Divisional Vice President of Talent, Diversity, and Change Management at the Co-op. And I wanted to just do a quick land acknowledgement. So I'll just read that word for word. So before we move on with the rest of the conversation, I want to recognize that we're coming together and have been doing business for 83 years on many lands and waters that were forcibly taken from their original inhabitants. For me, this means respectfully acknowledging that I am speaking to you while standing on the traditional and now occupied land of the Coast Salish peoples, including and not limited to the Snoqualmie, the Suquamish, the Duwamish, the Nisqually, the Tulalip, and the Muckleshoot. And I pay, and I hope we all pay respect to the coastal Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants, to all indigenous peoples. To acknowledge this land, and the land that we are all on, is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and colonialism, the effects of which still continue to displace and repress indigenous peoples today. It is to recognize these lands, these waters, and their significance for the peoples who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. And I encourage everyone to take the opportunity, like I have, to educate themselves on the indigenous peoples where they live. We are fortunate today to be in MOHAI, which has gone through great lengths to provide an accurate historical account of the native peoples of the Puget Sound region, and it is important that we remember that indigenous histories are vibrant and continue to be made today. So thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing this space. As we're all aware, we're here to celebrate Jim Whittaker, sitting in front of us. Thank you for that, and thank you, Jim. A man whose tremendous impact will be felt and has been felt for generations as his story is revisited in the history books. And I'm joined today by 4 esteemed colleagues, along with Leonard, and I'd just like them to introduce themselves. We'll start with the end, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
Great, thanks, Mohammed. Hi, I'm Jaime Colling. I am a program officer at the REI Cooperative Action Fund, a separate and distinct entity of REI. The REI Cooperative Action Fund is a public 501c3 charity that aims to serve and support communities on justice, equity, and inclusion in the outdoors. I'm celebrating my 12th year with REI this year. I started at the Seattle store 12 years ago as a retail specialist doing outreach in our Puget Sound area. So it's an honor to be here today and in the presence of Jim. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Andrew Dempsey. I'm a senior manager on our sustainability team. I use he, him pronouns. Been at REI for 3.5 years. And as I think about what my team does, the sustainability team, I'm actually drawn to the legacy that Jim set for the co-op 50 plus years ago. And I wanted to read just a quick quote that I found from his letter to members from a 1972 edition of Viewpoint. Generally speaking, the forests of America have abundant capacity to absorb more hikers. However, the delicate ecosystems of alpine parklands, desert oasis, ocean dunes, lake shores, marshes, riverbanks, and the like are everywhere threatened. We must lessen the impact of human-animal on the trail country and the wilderness. And as I think about what the mission of our team is today, the sustainability team, it really is to be steward of the co-op and getting folks outside with less impact. So whether it's working with our suppliers in our supply chain for how we make gear, down through how we operate and run our stores, we want to get folks outside, connect them to the outdoors with the least impact on the land as possible. So it's an honor to be here, Jim, today, still continuing in your legacy and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Susan Viscon, and I use she, her pronouns. And I am the Vice President and Executive Director of a newly formed organization at REI called Path Ahead Ventures. Path Ahead Ventures is a fund and organization that partners and invests with founders of color in the outdoor space. And I've had the privilege of working at the co-op just 25 years, my sabbatical year. And I remember when I first joined the co-op and people would ask, "Oh, you work at REI, here's my member number." And they would be so proud to tell me how low the member number, not as low as 647, so Jim definitely has that one. And I had the pleasure of meeting both Jim and Diane at our 2014 leadership conference, and my good friend Linda Givler, who was our climbing buyer at the time, introduced us. So I have a picture with you guys, which I will definitely treasure, and it was an honor to meet you then, and I'm thrilled to be here celebrating your accomplishments and its impact on the co-op. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leonard Garfield, and I'm the director of MOHAI, and I'm just thrilled to have you all here. And Jim, when I was briefing myself a little bit getting ready, I found in our collection that we have a photograph of you from 1946, before you worked at REI, before you ascended Mount Everest, before you testified to Congress.
I'm still in high school.
And do you know what it's a photograph of? It's a photograph of Jim working with the mountaineers to demonstrate mountain rescue in Lincoln Park in West Seattle. Do you remember that? We got a picture of it. And so we're so honored to have you here and to have your history part of the stories that we share. And Diane, it's good to see you. Diane has helped save many of the maritime vessels and traditions that we have in our region. So thank you, Diane, too.
Great.
And I've got some facts that I'd like to share about Jim for those that may not know. So I'm going to read through some of those. Jim, these may make you blush, which is okay, but I'm going to go ahead and read those. So for folks that may not know, Jim was hired as REI's first full-time employee in 1955 as the general manager. At that time, the co-op was 17 years old. Our only storefront was above the locally iconic Green Apple Pie restaurant in Seattle. And the term storefront should be interpreted loosely. It was actually inside an office of an accountant at a mayor for the exchange of 5% of the co-op sales. And also, under Jim's leadership, REI experienced one of its steepest periods of growth. When he was hired, REI's annual sales had broken $10,000 for the first time, and total memberships were hovering just around 8,000. And then in 1971, Jim was made CEO.
I just said,
Yes.
I was the only employee in that company for at least 6 months. Lloyd Anderson worked for Seattle Transit, the guy that invited me to work to run REI. And so, anyway, just to get that straight, I was the only employee.
That's an important clarification, for sure.
I had to close the company to go down the hall to take a pee. I just want to make clear, no one else was there. And Lloyd Anderson retired 5 years later from Seattle Transit and came to REI that by then was doing pretty good, damn it.
Thank you. Just a wealth of history. So Jim, thank you for that. It's a very important clarification to make. I want to just, again, applaud Jim and applaud all that he's done for the co-op. So I just ask us all today. Okay, I'd love to transition into our panel discussion, if everybody's okay with that. So I'm going to first start off with Leonard. Quick question. So we are guests in your museum, and thank you for inviting us. Can you just kick off by explaining a little more about the history of the cooperative movement, and particularly as it relates to Seattle?
Yeah. Well, the co-op movement, of course, way predates REI or any of our time in Seattle. all the way back to England, really. But Washington State was so remote from the sources of power. We were, pretty dominated by railroad companies based in Minneapolis, by the way, where Muhammad lives. Yep, bankers in New York, kind of controlled our fate. So very early on in the growth of this region, at the turn of the last century, farmers and loggers and small business people and consumers got together and said, we need to do something, organized business in a way that gives us more power and more control over what we're doing. And the co-op movement really flourished. And there's some very early co-ops, early on. I mean, in 1889, after the Great Seattle Fire, Washington Mutual Bank was really a financial co-op, if you can imagine that. These younger people don't remember one or two, because that imploded. But Dairy Gold, that's a co-op of dairy farmers. It began in 1916, but it really all took off during the Great Depression. And we see group health forming in the 1930s. We see, of course, REI coming up in the 1930s. We see savings and loans and credit unions like PEMCO being formed. And the trend really continued into all kinds of cooperatives like Treetop Cooperative and so forth. But as we talk about cooperatives, there's a movement, but each one is so unique. And I think the REI story is emblematic of that uniqueness. It is one of a kind. So it's part of a tradition that we celebrate in this region of smart people doing smart things and working together. That's who we are in Seattle. But REI is an exemplar of that and really sets the bar high for how we can work together to achieve not only financial and business goals, but community goals. And it's a team, and Jim always has said in every public statement, everything you read about REI or the ascent of Mount Everest or conservation movement, it's everybody working together. And I think that's part of the Seattle spirit that Jim and REI reflect.
Thank you for that. And it's, so for folks that don't know, I'm about 9 months into the co-op, and I think that concept of team is very transparent to everything that we do at the co-op as well. I want to share some quick facts and then ask Jaime and Andrew to comment on some of those. So, so many of our members have an REI garage sale story. I'd like to talk about our first one, which I'm sure Jim remembers fondly. So the World's Fair in 1962 was hosted in Seattle, and it nearly marked the end of the co-op. Water mains were pushed past their limit to fuel fountains around the city. You remember, and flooded our Capitol Hill location. All the inventory was seemingly ruined, and Jim was the first one on the scene. He got to work drying out sleeping bags and making sure that carabiners did not rust. And after the insurance company said they wanted nothing to do with the inventory, it was all put on sale to discount for members. So Jaime and Andrew, oh yeah, go Jim, go for it. Yeah, let's hear it.
I got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was at home on Mercer Avenue. Mr. Whittaker, your warehouse here is full of water. I said, what? He said, yeah, they were testing the water pressure for the World's Fair and broke a main down here at your warehouse at 7th and Pike. I said, ooh, is it very bad? He said, well, there's a 7-foot water line in your basement. I thought, that can't be true. And I went down there, it was true. And I was lucky. The fire department, one of the heads of the fire department lived 7 houses away in West Seattle on Barber Heights. Nice guy and everything else. He said, Jim, we're going to cover it. We're going to cover your losses. And so I thought, by God, we could get out of this alive.
Amazing story. Thank you, Jim.
But anyway, it was a hell of a shock. But we had the fire department out there for weeks, wiping off the bottles and cleaning up the stuff they could. But the sleeping bags, the soft goods, oh God. Because it wasn't just water, it was mud. And I came down and thought, geez, I walked down the steps into it doesn't look so bad. Then I look up, sure enough, there was a water line. You can see the water line. God, and then this pile of stuff on the floor. But the fire department worked hard helping us clean it up and everything, so we had a sale. I think we made more money than we would have made selling regular.
That works. That's a way to, that's a good bailout for sure. So thank you for that, Jim. Jaime and Andrew, I'll start with Jaime first, but can you just talk a little more about that story and the trajectory that initiated for the co-op?
Well, as a former retail employee, I can tell you I loved the garage sales. It was just a fun time in the store, community coming in, looking for great gear. But I think what it really represents is this idea of REI being a different kind of company and thinking about how we can do things in service of our members and really create a connected ecosystem between the business and the member, and how we can take these opportunities and help create access for the product. So pretty pivotal for us in terms of this member first mentality.
And if I get back to that quote that I read when I was introducing myself about lessening our impact on the wilderness, one of the major initiatives that my team runs for the co-op is our climate strategy and fighting the climate crisis. And manufacturing and making product has a huge impact in terms of emissions, pollution, etc. So one of the most sustainable things we can do is keep gear in use as long as possible. So things like the garage sale offer opportunities for folks to keep gear in use longer. And so, even though it came out of an accident, that really set a standard and a legacy for us, thinking about how we can, through the creation of our product and then usage of that by our members and our customers, how we can make durable products and make them repairable and keep them in use for as long as possible. And that's one of the ways we can have less of an impact on the wilderness and on the outdoors. So I think about that as really a pivotal moment in how we think about our gear and just the benefits that it can provide if we're able to keep it in use as long as possible.
Okay, I want to share another moment and then just get some input from Leonard. So another key moment in Jim's legacy came in 1968 when he got permission from the board to fly to Washington, D.C. and testify on behalf of REI for the creation of the North Cascades National Park, Redwoods National Park, and Pastian Wilderness. His argument was radical for this time, as much of the country's wilderness legislation was anchored to the industry, timber in particular. So Jim, in all his fury, urged Congress to prioritize another industry, the recreation industry. He argued that preserving wilderness created all kinds of jobs, from boot and ski makers to salespeople and product designers. So my question for Leonard, was this common in the 60s and for companies to be campaigning on a national level like this? What other precedents do we have as an example?
Well, I think when corporations traditionally think of campaign, they think of a marketing campaign. And what Jim was doing was taking a much bigger view of how corporate interests and the cooperative interests intersect with the broader community interests, and truly the necessity of working for the conservation of our wilderness and our natural areas. I mean, corporations have been heavily involved in Congress forever. We had two wonderful senators who were the senators from Boeing, but they were also good supporters of wilderness and stuff, so we only say good things about them. But very, very few corporate leaders, people in management or in industry, would troop down to Washington, D.C. and argue for something that wasn't directly related to their immediate bottom line, in particular procurements and things like that. When Jim went down there, and I looked, Jim, to see who else was testifying, there weren't a whole lot of corporate leaders testifying on behalf of the national parks or for wilderness preservation. So you were, do we have other examples? I couldn't find one. So you may be standing pretty much alone in that. You certainly were the first person to do that.
I was too dumb to know any better. No, I just said, yeah, some of that higher echelon of the business and industry and so forth, I had to go to learn along with it. But if they talked about nature and the natural world, trees and everything else, hell, I didn't want to hear board feet. I wanted to go up and hug the tree. I didn't. the natural world is where it's at, damn it, and that's what I would fight to my death for. We're lucky to have this planet, by God, and it's, anyway, that's a little bit what I'm going to say when I finish up here, but, you know, it's a magical planet, and we've got to do what we can to preserve it for the life that's on it now and coming. Not just humans, plants, animals, the whole damn thing. It's a magical world. We're going to keep it that way. And so I did what I could when I was appointed, and I began to get into the political world when I was appointed to the state parks, first of all, and then appointed to on the board of the National Park System, where I had a chance to meet some high-powered people, Department of Interior, and et cetera, and they could do things. So that's enough of me. I don't want to spend too much time.
No, that's wonderful. I think it's worth applause. And having sharp elbows in Washington, D.C. is very important, especially in the 60s. So thank you for that, Jim. Question for Jaime. So, Jaime, there's a very clear path from this moment to the work that you do now. I'd love to just hear your perspective on what has changed since then, what has stayed relatively consistent, and what do you think is about to happen next?
Ooh, so many parts of that question. Yeah, I have to first say that this period of time of Jim's leadership and impact on the co-op is some of my favorite. I get goosebumps when I look back and read the viewpoints and the messages to members, because it's really REI showing up as a different kind of company and standing on behalf of the membership and really advocating for what the members need, really, and what the human spirit needs, and what also as an industry was very important to us. And I want to read a little bit in 1972, the environmental message, and why I felt like Jim's taking a stance at DC came from an angle of, yes, recreation economy, but again, the human spirit was part of that. And I think that's what has set REI on this path, is that it was more than just the industry. It's about what we need, the sense of belonging and spirituality we may find out in nature. And so this may be something you've heard or read many times, but I am profoundly always inspired by this. It says, from one standpoint, this direction may be seen as simple self-interest. REI is in the business of supplying equipment to be used in the wildlands. The business then is founded on a land resource just as surely as is a timber company. And the business cannot continue without protecting its basic resource. But of course, REI is more than a business. It's an organization of more than 300,000 people concerned with wilderness values. Their basic resource, yours that is the land. And what that means to you, measured by the hours and days and weeks you spend exploring the silent forests, roaming ridges and challenging the wild peaks, contemplating the mists of morning and the shades of evening, and thus coming closer to nature and yourself is essentially priceless. It was very clear in this moment in time that yes, as a co-op, as 300,000 members, we have a voice and we're here to protect and preserve. And I think Jim showing up at Congress was really a profound way to stand for the industry, which now is a $700 billion industry, providing over 4 million jobs with 20 million members. The scale of that impact across the country is profound. So Jim, thank you for your courage and strength to be there in that moment for the co-op. It's pretty huge, and I do have the honor of serving and connecting to our communities across the country who care about this work. Every co-op that we have across the country has staff who are passionate and dedicated about being connected to those wild places and connecting people to them. So I don't know if that answers your question in full, but that's really where I see this moment in time being a profound impact on our work today.
Yeah, not only does it answer my question in full, but plus some as well. So thank you for that. You know, I definitely look at I just came off a vacation with my family. I've got a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and we spent time at some state and national parks, and my 5-year-old said to me, he said, "Dad, is this free for everyone?" And I said, "Yeah, anyone who can get here can enjoy this." And we spent time in Western New York looking at waterfalls, and I said, but people had to fight to make that available. So again, like to your point, there are paths that were paved so that we can enjoy some of the land and some of the outdoors. So thank you for that. Okay, I'd like to turn over to Susan. So Susan, quick question for you. Would you speak on how the scope of REI's advocacy has changed over the years? And also, similar to for Jamie's question, what is your vision for where we take it next in this day and age?
All right, well, I think about Jim's testimony on that day, and it remains true that the importance of the industry, and Jaime talking about 700 billion, helped bring focus and support across. And we actually have what we call the Capital Summit, happens every year in April, where all of the outdoor industry leaders come together in Washington, D.C. to advocate. And so really, thank you for laying the ground for that. I think what we're seeing as we're considering how have things changed or what do we need to look at next, we note that who does the outdoor industry represent? And we stepped back in 2020 and began to take a look at the diversity of our suppliers and our brands. And we noted that less than 1%, we estimate, are owned and led by a person of color, yet 30% of the people that recreate outdoors identify as such. And so we really believe there's an opportunity for us to change the shape of that and participate in how economic mobility, influence can be really representative of those who love and share the outdoors. And so that's what we're focused on. It's one thing that Path Ahead Ventures is championing right now, but alongside other people in the industry too.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Susan. I'm going to share a couple more stats, and then I'm going to just do an open question for all the panelists. So by 1973, you can see I'm taking us through history. So by 1973, REI members were speaking up on taking more action to better care for the lands that they enjoyed, and employees were listening. So our first stewardship project was planned targeting a single overused lake in the Cascades. Through Jim's leadership and public turnout was so large that 8 lakes were cleaned up that day. The real power of our cooperative was felt, and that energy went on to fuel action across the industry. It even played a hand in the founding of National Trails Day. Jim, do you remember that? Can you share something about that?
I do, because I remember 1973 when I married Diane. So a month after we got married, right? So no, that was a good cleanup. I had the governor, Dan Evans, who became a friend, and the mayor of Seattle came up with us to clean up the lake. And I was a diver too. REI used to sell tanks and scuba gear and stuff, but just a little bit of that. We didn't do much. But I dove, and I mean, the world is a magical place, underwater and above it. I've been down 185 feet and up 29,000 a lot of fun. But anyway, that worked out good. Boy, the hunters would shoot the cans on top of the lake and they'd sink, and the floor of these alpine lakes, my God, were covered with rusting cans and all that stuff, and it was a mess and so forth. So we got some buses that took us up there, and man, we hauled a lot of garbage. There's some pictures of that that show that happening. But yeah, Diane was up on that along with the governor's son. I'm handing some stuff up from lake and stuff. It's a beautiful alpine, oh man, beautiful alpine country. We hauled out huge loads of garbage, just like we did up on Everest. We hauled out garbage. Anyway, leave no trace, right? If you pack it in, you pack it out, damn it. We gotta take care of the place, right?
I agree. And what a good honeymoon story, right? For sure. Okay, so let me go to the panel.
I was going to say they can hold that mic and you guys can share.
Yeah, we'll share, no problem at all. So I want to talk a little bit. I'll start with Susan. So we realize that by activating our members, we can do a lot more good in the world. How do we best use that legacy today? What would you advise us on?
Well, one thing I was thinking about is through the pandemic, when we talk to store employees, one of the things that they have missed the most are the stewardship and the cleanup. And so, that's something we've just reinstituted over the last few months, but for safety, we couldn't do it for a while. And it's interesting that that's like part of how it would come together as employees. And so thank you for kicking that off. I was thinking back in 2015, it was right after the Nepal earthquakes, and REI decided to donate $50,000 to Mercy Corps to help clean up. And we sent a note out to all of our members sharing that and providing a link for our members to also donate if they wanted. And this was really the power of being a cooperative membership. Within days, more than 10,000 members gave contributions of over $800,000. And so I think we looked at that, and I remember for myself, it's like, that we can activate a community. How else can we use that? And I think we've been doing that all across. It was really amazing. And later that year was actually the year that we took the bold step to say, let's close our doors for Black Friday and pay our employees and encourage our members to get outside. And so really, I think, you've started this momentum about what it means to bring together the co-op and the membership.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Andrew, what would you share?
Yeah, if you think about the size of the co-op, while we're much larger than perhaps we were in the 70s, as a retailer, we're actually still relatively small. But one of the ways we can punch above our weight in terms of impact is to activate our members, our very passionate members. And if you look at over 20 million lifetime members, that's a lot of action and impact that you can have if you're able to direct that passion towards things that we care about, protecting public places and advocating for that protection. So, today I think about things like our Cooperative Action Network, where we ask our members to advocate for legislation that protects the outdoors. And we've recently, just within the last year or so, launched that and had tremendous participation, thousands of members advocating for policies that will protect wild places. And as we think to the future, more from a sustainability lens, we think about even the impact that members' lives have on the outdoors. We think about how they're getting to outdoor places, transportation, thinking about the energy they're using in their homes. We're 100% renewable energy in our stores. How might we provide pathways for our members to procure renewable energy in their homes? If we think about vehicles that folks are driving to our stores or to the trailheads, how can we advocate for electrification of that transportation or alternative means for folks to get outdoors? So I think there's a lot, we have a legacy of doing a lot in this space, and I think moving forward, there's a lot of opportunity that's still there to activate the power of our membership.
Jaime, where'd you at?
The 1972 Malacca project was such a foundational point for our stewardship projects and this idea of local co-op. As stores opened across the country and outside the Puget Sound region, we continue to invest in those local communities and empower employees to be connected to stewardship opportunities where those new stores existed. Fast forward to 2022, we've got 177 stores, 3 DCs. And we just you know, this year we'll invest over $7 million in nonprofit partners across the country. But to Susan's point, with 20 million plus members, what else can we do and what can we do together? And that's where the Cooperative Action Fund, you know, REI's separate public 501c3 charity invites members to participate in that, to help support the organizations who are doing and making and creating equity and belonging in the outdoors. So that I go back to that memory and that moment a lot in our work as a foundation of how important it is to make sure the co-op stays locally relevant in every community that we're in, so we authentically are serving the places and the people who need the access to the outdoors.
Well said. The power of the network is the sky's the limit. So again, yeah. I want to share some quick information I'd like to also open this up to the panel. So John Daniels, the author of Cooperation: An American Way, defines cooperation as any human activity in which more than one person voluntarily takes action to benefit not only one or some, but all of the members of the group. This time I'll start with Andrew. So can you speak to and perhaps provide a few examples of how this philosophy relates to your work?
Absolutely. You know, one of our values as an organization is we go further together, and I think that's foundational to most organizations, but for REI it really means it's authentic. We're cooperative. We do go further together. And as I think about the work, again, that our team does, got a steamboat coming by in the background.
Good sound effects.
You know, I look back over the last few decades to, particularly within our industry, within the outdoor industry, to the role that REI has played in creating organization and movement within the industry, to think about sustainability, to think about waste, to think about the climate crisis. So, you know, the Outdoor Industry Association, founding member of that. There are industry tools that we use to understand the impact of how we make product, that we helped bring folks together to create indices that, you know, now major retailers like Walmart and others use to understand the impact of their products. So I think we can look back on this legacy of seeing a problem and recognizing that we need to go solve it, but that we won't have the impact we want if we go and solve it alone. So we need to bring others together in order to do that. And I think that's one of the, it's something that makes REI really special, is that when we think about problem solving, we never really think about, well, how can we just solve this for our bottom line or our business or our members? We think about the collective. And yeah, so there's so many examples within our world of sustainability over the last few decades that I feel really proud of the foundational role that REI has played, a really catalytic movement in standing up a lot of resources there.
Great. Susan, what would you add?
You know, I came to the outdoor industry from department store world, and I was amazed on how collaborative the outdoor industry was. And I was reflecting on a story that Jim told in his book about him being astonished that more than 20 climbers from the Pacific Northwest flew to Denali for a rescue mission on the John Day expedition that Lou and Jim led. And he reflected on really the climbing community and how you support each other. And you said in there, you're like, there's an ethos, there's this commitment, you know, when you're roped up or you're helping each other, you're always there for each other. And I think that that actually is the seed of what the outdoor industry was born on. So when we come together, it's often for the collective good. And there are very few industries that competitors would work side by side to deliver on values, whether it be sustainability, if it's inclusion, if it's conservation. We see that happening all the time. And so that was actually, as we were standing up Path Ahead Ventures, it was a foundation for this concept. We believe that the industry and our competition and our REI will be better when there's more diversity in leadership and in product creation. And so when we created Path Ahead Ventures, it was always with the thought that we're doing this alongside others. and that it's not just for REI's benefit, and that our founders would be better off when they have a broader network, whether it be our competitors, our brands, and within REI. So in reading that, I'm like, wow, this is really where the seed of it started, is that climbing ethos.
Yeah, okay. We were up there, stuck up there for about 10 days, and two of the team couldn't travel too well. One had a broken ankle, and we were sitting up there. A plane was viewing us from above. A couple of people in a small plane that crashed into the ice right next to us, burst into flame, killed them both. We felt terrible about it, but there's nothing we could do about that either. But we were amazed at the number of people that came from the climbing community, from all over, not just from Seattle, but from Portland and from other mountain rescue places. And so we were sitting up there, and the people kept coming up. Louis and I are in a tent up there, close to the highest tent on the mountain, waiting for evacuation for Beach Honing and John Day. And all of a sudden we hear this voice outside, "Is the co-op open?" There's Dee Molinar on the rescue team. He come up and "How you Dee? Good to see you." He said, "Let's go, let's get out of here, you guys." And so he helped escort us down off the mountain. We loaded John Day and Shoney into a helicopter to get off, and Louis and I wandered back down in the high camp and sat out in the low camp and sat out a blizzard, But I want to mention something about this teamwork and stuff. One thing that I think it started from the teamwork of mountain climbers. And basically, the co-op started with mountaineering, mountain climbers. And the rule that we had when we began to climb was, we tried to pass off, is that it's important that everyone wants to get to the same goal, get somebody to the top of the mountain. If you can get them up there, the expedition is successful. No matter who makes it, then you're successful too by having done the best you could to get somebody on top. And that was true of the company. If you're going to have a successful company, you all are going to take credit for it, because you're going to bust ass to make it the best company in that field, the best, and you can be proud of it. If you've worked hard and don't make it, you've done enough. You've done the best you could do. You should feel good about it. And if we get the mountain, if we get one person up, damn, we've climbed the mountain. That's it. And so it was that feeling of the team working together to get just somebody, to make this a success, to get somebody. And I think that followed through in the way the co-op was, because we all had that bond of knowing we had to rescue ourselves. Basically, so you got to be able to take care of yourself in the company and on mountain. And so it was teamwork again, and teams are vital. And nothing with a team, you got to love each other. I mean, the human spirit likes love, right? And it makes strength in a company where people work together. Yeah. Okay, that's probably enough of that.
No, to me, the themes that keep on coming out is shared goals, shared success, right? So again, I think that it's resonating, and it resonates and continues to resonate in everything that we do. So thank you for that. I want to turn the next question over to Leonard, and I want to talk about all this wonderful exhibit of all these great artifacts from the 1963 Everest Ascent. This is my first time coming through the MOHAI and just walking through, and I was like, I could spend a whole weekend here just looking at all these great artifacts. So Leonard, can you just talk to us about what was significant about the first ascent in 1963, and how did it pave the way for things like the International Peace Climb?
Well, I'm going to let Jim talk about the incredible achievements, because there's the guy who made the history. But I want to look a little bit bigger picture, if I may, Mohammed. You know, the early 60s were such a heady time in America. We had a new president who thought about the new frontier. We had people that we were sending out to space. And even here in Seattle, we had a World's Fair. And Jim, you were part of that incredible period of optimism, of proving that we can dream something big and we can do something big. And I know it was a team, but when that team came back, you were the representation, along with your colleagues, of what America can achieve working together with a vision to really accomplish something. May 1st, right, 1963, so it's going to be 60 years on May 1st coming up. In June, Jim came back to SeaTac Airport, and there were throngs of people there. And there was a parade for Jim on 4th Avenue downtown, and I was thinking about this. I know a little bit about Seattle history. I don't think there's ever been a parade for any person in Seattle since then, so good on you. But you...
78 Sonics.
Well, the Sonics, they were a whole team. Jim had a whole parade, and Gordy Clinton, the mayor, remember, and Governor Rossellini were there to salute you and give you the keys to the city. What you really did is, when we invited the world in for the World's Fair, you showed us how to get to the top of the world. You took Seattle there with you. You really created the embodiment of what this community is about, our appreciation of the outdoors, our commitment to preserving our natural world, and the values of working together that you embody and that your team embodied. So, what did it mean historically for mountain climbing? I'll let Jim talk about that, but what it meant for this community is you put us on the map as being a place that understood a world much bigger than just one small city in the Northwest, and so we thank you for that.
I was really lucky. The whole team was lucky. But remember, and I want to stress this here, it took a team to do it. The second day on the mountain, one of our team, Jake Breitenbach, was killed in the ice fall. And I just want to know, we worked together to achieve, to get somebody to the summit. I was just lucky enough to be the first guy. And everybody worked hard to get somebody up. You know, we got to get somebody up there, what the hell? And so it was an effort, and I knew when I got close to it, I'd never have another crack at it, so that's why I stepped out of the tent. In 50-mile-an-hour winds, 35 below zero, got knocked over by the wind. So Gambu and I staggered up to the summit. They asked Gambu, the Sherpa, nice guy, Noang Gambu, a sweetheart, just a beautiful person. Gambu, what was the first thing you thought of after having reached the highest point of Earth? Gambu answered for me as well when he said, how to get down.
That's important.
Gambu was a sweetheart. Went back to meet President Kennedy and got the hoverboard, which is here. Gambu put a friendship scarf around the neck of the president. We went in to have a dinner at the White House. He started to salt my food. Salt my food. Here's Gambu, my Sherpa, salting my food. He wants to carry my briefcase around the Capitol building and said, Gambu, not here, not here. So anyway, he was just a sweetheart. He's used to helping people. He was a cook on Hillary and Tenzing's first ascent.
Oh, right.
He was a cook in base camp. And anyway, he was just this Sherpa people are wonderful people. And,
you know, Jim, I know you know this, one of the largest Sherpa communities outside of the Himalayas is here in Seattle. Wonderful community with great history.
I'm talking to
No, this is the conversation. So, we have about 10 minutes or so left. I want to make sure that we can wrap up in time, but I also wanted to just open up the conversation for any questions from the audience. Yes, no, so, yeah, so Jim, can you come up? Yeah,
You come
great.
up here now.
Yeah, I got you. My son Josh.
Yeah, this is perfect. Thank you.
I think I can do it here.
Live sound effects, right?
Okay. So I can see our audience.
So I think, first question, yes, sure.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be here with you, and thank you for everything you've done with REI. I started getting into mountaineering about 18 months ago, summited 3 out of 5 volcanoes, and I rock climb, and I've given a huge amount of my personal earnings to REI, so I definitely feel like a member. One of the things I've noticed, and going back to a theme earlier, is lack of representation in the mountains. And that's a thing that's near and dear to my heart, and that I try to use my power as a white cis male to help bring more people, make it more accessible. I think REI, because of the place that it is, has a real unique opportunity to make a difference there. I have friends that are part of a group, 510 Hikers, in California, that recently has been partnering up with REI, but I'm interested to know, what is the strategy there, because I feel like there's just a massive opportunity, and even if we look at who is here in this audience today, is very telling, and that has to change, and should change.
Sure. Who would like to jump in? Yeah.
No, that is an incredible point, and something that the co-op, I think, has been thinking about for a very long time. As a member of a team who's been working with nonprofit organizations and thinking about belonging in the outdoors, there's a lot of healing, right, that needs to happen around what belonging means to some communities, what safety means to those communities. So how can we help and learn from those communities as we build solutions, right, for us, with us? So that type of mentality. The co-op is deeply dedicated to racial equity, diversity, inclusion, and climate initiatives. And so as Susan's work with Path Ahead and our the Cooperative Action Fund, really focusing on supporting organizations who are supporting equity, belonging, and health and nature, there's definitely opportunity across the country to be connected. And if you have organizations doing that work, there is an option to nominate them on the website for support from the Cooperative Action Fund as a member, to be part of that, to be connected to what the community is doing in the broader REO ecosystem. I'm happy to give you my information later to anybody in the audience if there's a certain community that you're interested in supporting or connecting with. The work is happening across the country, and it's beautiful, and our staff at the forefront of that, as these are their communities in which they work and they live. So they're really part of this cooperative process. So yeah, it's definitely a key focus for the co-op, and we're happy to share more information for you.
Thank you.
There are 2 more questions, and a few things that Jim wants to share. Yes.
Okay, so I'm from a fairly well-known East Coast climbing community, and relative guy and Laura Waterman wrote the Backwoods Ethics in the 70s. So anyway, my question for you, Mr. Whittaker, and first of all, this is a fantastic event. See, they're even echoing. What do you think about this proposal for a national park department that's standalone, that's separate from everything? And then maybe a related question, kind of touches on the last gentleman's question. My sister's been working for 30 years on the private side of the parks, which is a real issue, privatization of the national parks. I'm very interested to see what we can do on that front, what REI is doing on that front, and as a member. So kind of 2 questions, one for Mr. Whittaker and one for whoever wants to take it.
Would you like to answer that one?
So it's hard to here behind the mask, the National Park Service alone, separate from Department of Interior, separate from Fish and Wildlife, its own thing that actually gets the attention to preserve wildness and wilderness. What do you think of that idea?
I'm sorry. Midweek by time and fate. I'm wearing hearing aids, and I really didn't catch the gist of that.
So the question is that what do you think about a standalone National Parks Department? Right. So, a standalone National Parks Department.
What about them? What do you want to know about them?
Yeah. What are your thoughts? Is that something that should be pursued? Is that a good idea?
I don't know where we're going. I need to.
Is that a proposal that has actually come forward?
Yes.
So I don't think either Jim or I are familiar with that, but Jim, apparently there's a proposal to separate the National Parks Department from the Department of the Interior and make it its own department. The question is, what do you think of that?
I'm just starting to think about it.
That's a wonderful answer. And we need your brain, so let's continue.
Is Jim a politician?
I thought I'd read something about a couple of minutes, and then that might answer some questions. So
Wonderful.
I'll run through this thing, okay?
Thank you.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. And some of this you've heard. On May 1st, 1963, I was lucky enough to become the first American to stand on the summit of Everest, along with Sherpa teammate Nwang Gambu. I was one of a team of 19 Americans who worked together for 4 months to put someone on the summit. I told you we lost Jake the second day on the mountain. Now, our team of 19 Americans, there's 2 of us left, myself and Tom Hornbein, that's all. But we worked together and we're good friends, and Hornbein did the first ascent with Unsold up the New West Ridge. And Bishop and Jerstad went up 3 weeks later at the same time up the South Call route. Met on top, started down, got trapped by darkness and wind, and spent the night out, the highest bivouac in the world. Unsold and Bishop lost all their toes, but they made it back down, and we got back out. It was 3 weeks after I'd climbed. I was sitting in base camp. Come on, damn it, you got to get the mountain. Let's get off the mountain. Let's go home. Anyway, they did it. Amazing climb. Amazing climb. Okay. A few years ago, my wife Diane Roberts and I were discussing what to do with the ISAC's flags and camera I carried to the summit that day. We decided we wanted them to be seen by climbers, adventurers, historians, and other members of the public, not just by our family. So I want to thank REI and MOHAI for making this possible and making a permanent display. I think that's wonderful. I really want to thank you all very much. REI. Okay, I was damn lucky to be born in Seattle in the Pacific Northwest back in 1929. Yes, I'm 93. Okay, long time ago. So I grew up with parents and a family and group of people who love the forests, the rivers, the beaches, the oceans, and the mountains that we've got here in the Northwest. Damn, we're lucky to have all of it. I've been around the world a couple of times. There are a lot of places, including in the United States, that don't have it we have. We're lucky, awfully lucky. Okay. REI Co-op and the Mountaineers enabled me to meet and learn daily from experts daily about the outdoor pursuits, because I'm on the floor. They're coming in every day, professionals, talking about what they've seen in the outdoors and what they've discovered. Twin brother Lou and I climbed our first glaciating peak, Mount Olympus, while in high school. And we moved from there up guiding with the Rainier Guide Service while at Seattle University. I've been blessed with my wife, Diane Roberts, and our sons, Josh and Lee, who have shared our adventures. Diane, among other things, was a member of the 1978 K2 expedition and the 1990 Mount Everest peace climb. Leaf has climbed to the summit of Mount Everest, wrote a book about his adventures, My Own Man on the Mountain. It's here, I saw. Josh is earning a PhD in archaeology from UW and has done months and years of research on remote islands in Indonesia. That's Josh there. Finally, I'd like to make a quote of the author of our book, Americans on Everest, James Adams the Ullman. He makes it clear to me, and it's amazing how it covers a lot of things. But he wrote in the book, challenge is the core and mainspring of all human activity. If there is a disease, we cure it. If there is a wrong, we right it. If there's a record, we break it. If there's an ocean, we cross it. If there's a mountain, we climb it. So, thanks for having me here, having us here. I appreciate it. And so let's go outside and enjoy the planet. And remember, no child left inside. Thanks a lot.
Thank you again. Thank you, Jim, and thank you for all that we learned from you just in this short 60 minutes. It makes me want to wish we had another 60 more minutes to talk more about this, so thank you.
It's nice of you.
I just want to do a quick acknowledgement and just thank, first of all of you for coming today. It's been great, great engagement, great conversation for sure. I also want to thank Leonard and the folks at MOHAI for hosting us and hosting this. So to call out Marielle and the entire MOHAI staff for their generous efforts in hosting the event. Just the richness, and like I said, I wish I had another weekend to be here to learn from all the greatness here. I just want to call out some of the folks from REI who've helped to put this together as well. So well done, amazing job putting this together and assembling us all here today. Carrie Kelly and John Junkie as well for the work that they've done also. And then obviously none of this could happen without Anna Lee and all the coordinators that provided for us. Also the deep wisdom of Caitlin Gottler, Josh Petrie, and Haley Knigge as well from our So the last plug that I will ask is for all of you to enjoy this space, treasure this space, take advantage of all the history here in this room, but also in the rest of MOHAI as well for the rest of the weekend. And thank you for putting up with me for a good 6 minutes. So thank you again.